Welcome to another episode of Straight Outta Gabriola. I'm your host, Ken Gurr. The episode title explains it all. I'm talking with some of my favorite islanders who have had close encounters of the big critter kind. Now, it's true these are pretty rare occurrences, but should we just totally chill out and relax about the idea? Even make fun of it? When my friends or relatives come here from the big city to stay with us, we sometimes put them up in our treehouse, just at the bottom of our yard, just to have a nice nature experience, sleep outside, hear the sounds of wildlife. And usually it's a time of year when the barred owls are really calling, like in the spring or early fall. And we've got a lot of good owl habitat near us. And you know, if the timing's just perfect when they're walking out to the treehouse for the night, well, I can't resist.
What is that?
I don't know, but get in the house now! There are no big animals on Gabe beyond the odd aggressive deer when they're not getting hand-fed enough. When the rumor mill cranks up, and on the Facebook community pages they just light up with reports of a bear or a cougar sighting, we can pretty much divide the island into the skeptics and the believers. You know, recently there was a photo being shared around on Facebook about a possible Sasquatch on Gabriola. Now, I've got to call out Dave Henniger on that one. Now, come on, Dave. Let's get real here. It's a well-known fact that Sasquatches, they're terrible swimmers. Bears, cougars, and other wildlife, on the other hand. To start things off, I went straight to the authorities on this one. I met BC Wildlife Conservation Officer Dan for a cup of coffee and a hearty bowl of soup at Madrona's. He was over to deal with something. He didn't really quite divulge it, but I think it was some kind of a rascallion raccoon that was up to some shenanigans at someone's place. We sat in the patrol truck, and I asked him about the Gabriola files he was working on. Have you heard about the Roosevelt elk? We're calling Franklin D. Roosevelt the elk. Have you had any updates on your desk, come across your desk about that?
I haven't heard anything on my desk about it, but I have heard that it's running around on the island, and it is definitely here.
Let's find out more. Here's Allana, Dawson, Thorne, followed by Mitchell T. Burns with their reports. Since probably you cited that elk, it's been validated. Someone's taken pictures of it on Cresta Roca. There's been more, but I think you were one of the first sightings. So do you remember?
I'm not sure, but I was driving home in June, and I remember it was June because I was out at ceramics classes, and I was coming home probably between 9:30 and 10, and it was still really light out. Like it was just starting to get dark. And I came around the corner on coming up Norwich, and I was like, what the heck is that? Because it was really big, and so it was kind of getting, like it was duckish. It was really big, and it was walking up, it was sauntering along, walking up Norwich Hill. And so,
sauntering.
Well, it was kind of, it was kind of like dum-dum-dum. And then I guess it heard the car, even though I had slowed down, and so then it jumped into the forest on the left. Yeah. And that's when I realized, because I wasn't sure what it was. I thought it was a moose at first, because it was really large.
It's not a deer. You know that much.
You
know your deer on the island.
Yes, I do. And so I thought it was maybe a moose. And then I realized, because then once it, the light, I could adjust my eyes to the light that it was, and my beams, I guess, were on it, that I knew from the buttocks.
Yes. The telltale elk buttocks.
Yes, that's right. And I came home and Googled it right away, and I was like, yeah, that's an elk. And so, of course, when my husband, Nelson, got up in the morning, I said, you're not going to believe this, but I saw an elk. And he was like, you did not see an elk. But I had posted on my Facebook post, just saw an elk, wow. Can't remember what exactly I said, but everybody started saying, yeah, there's been an elk sighting, and it's been around. So it was right at the beginning, and then it went on for... Because I was, following people's posts about it.
And that was last year?
Last June. This past June.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it has disappeared or if it's still out there.
Yeah, there's been there was a recent sighting of Cresta Roca with a photo of him again doing the saunter elk buttock
Yes.
sucker right across the guy's yard.
Okay,
So he's still hanging out.
And then I felt so bad for him that he'd been separated from his herd. So I think that it probably swam here, and how it got separated from its herd, I don't know. And then I thought, well, maybe it wanted to leave. Mm-hmm. Maybe it came to Gabriola like a lot of other people have come to. Like people come to Gabriola to get separated from their herd.
That's right.
They do. We have a lot of people come here for a reason.
See, that could be the theme of many of the critters that
we
hear may or may not be on the island, like cougar and bear.
We hear that Gabriola's kind of off the grid, and people are doing their own thing, and I don't necessarily have to go along with what everybody else is doing. Yeah. And so maybe that's what the elk was doing. That's what I had to come to.
I saw our elk in the tunnel this summer, and sort of stopped and scrambled around. And I was like, "Oh, I should try to take a picture." I was like, "I'm just gonna sit here and watch this elk, and I don't need a picture to
know that you're looking at an elk."
To know that I'm looking at an elk.
Yeah, and apparently he's likely still around. He's managing to find his way in the interspecies world, the island. With the deer, that's what I've heard anyway.
It'll be interesting to see what instinct pushes him off the island, or he just doesn't know what to do and gets stuck here and continues to be here. I think he's gonna have the wind's got to be blowing a certain way to be able to have any of his calls heard from the island.
Oh, the lonely bugger. Just as I was getting ready to produce this show, I was at the Gabriola Elementary School Christmas Craft Fair, where Gabriola's renowned watercolor artist Melinda Wilde had a booth, and she just saw Franklin D. Roosevelt elk about a week or two before. We stepped out of the noise of the gym just outside the doors, and looking out where Melinda saw our friend just 100 or so meters away from that very spot.
I was driving along North Road early in the morning, kind of misty, kind of special, Yeah,
atmosphere.
And then this thing comes out across the road in front of me, and I thought, oh dear, brake for deer. And then no, it was mammoth, like way bigger than my car. and just trotted across the road right in front of me with his big white butt and off down into the commons. And it was just a delight. I was honored that he chose to show himself to me.
And you saw antlers?
Definitely antlers. And it was way too big for a local deer. And the big white butt on them, that's the classic giveaway. I mean, this thing was a horse. It was not a deer. It was huge.
There's one of the lovely musicscapes from the Kerplunk CD, Lullabies for Big Eyes. There'll be a couple more in this show, just as segues between our reports here. And that CD is a masterpiece and a perfect antidote for these anxious times. I've posted a link to their page on the show's blog. Here once again is Officer Dan. Have you got anything on the Gabriola file right now that's active, dealing with bears or cougars or anything like that?
Nothing active at the moment, but we've had some anecdotal reports, a couple of second or third hand reports in the past.
Right.
A few people first hand reporting saying that they've seen a bear, a cougar, an aggressive deer, things like that.
Right. And again, from a conservation officer perspective, it's problem wildlife. Citing a bear, a cougar, you don't need to respond to any of that. That's just bears and cougars doing what they do in the wild.
Exactly.
It's if something happens, like they start attacking dogs or people or being a threat to anything, then you're going to try and deal with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna respond to some of those sighting reports that we get.
Yeah.
To help residents deal with the human side of the relationship. Keep those animals, because they're going to move through this area. They always do. And keep their behavior wild. Because their wild behavior is going to keep them away from people.
And then I guess in a case like Gabriola too, because people, like I was saying earlier, that we have people that you just really can't get it into their heads. Oh, how is a cougar over here? But then I look around and other people look at the situation and go, well, there's so much venison, so little time. There's so many deer on this island.
Absolutely.
You kind of think, well, why wouldn't a cougar swim over and take a few shots at things here?
Absolutely. There's a food source.
Yeah.
You can expect that a cougar is going to come over.
Yeah.
We've had bears on Newcastle and Protection Island. We've had cougars on DeSourcy Island to the south. Mm-hmm. It's not that far of a swim.
The cougar is the largest of North American cats. There are usually 2 to 5 cubs per litter. Their spotted coats will disappear in about 6 months, and they will stay with the mother for 1 to 2 years. An adult cougar may weigh 150 pounds, measure 7.5 feet in length, and can leap 20 to 30 feet with ease. For more information on the cougar, contact the Canadian Wildlife Service in Ottawa.
If you're a listener to this series, you may recall our next story from the episode Mouse, etc. I had a phone conversation with Ben Finn, who used to live here on the island, and I chatted with him on what I thought was going to be a story about a rodent or some other smaller pest on the island. I hear you've got a really good tale to tell.
I do. One of my prime moments on Gabriola.
And that's down Whalebone Beachway, right? Is that where you lived?
Yeah, I was just like 5 minutes from the end of the road where you walked out of the beach.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, yeah, let's hear the story.
So, one afternoon, I was standing on my back porch. I'd just let my dog out, and I was, having a cigarette and, enjoying the view. I mean, the back of my place is all crown land, right? So it's just solid forest, beautiful view. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting there, and a deer passes through at a pretty good clip too. And I was used to deers coming through my yard, but not flying. I mean, this deer was just bounding, and I was like, oh, that's odd. And so I turn and I look, and something comes through the brush. And it's all long, and it's moving at quite a good pace. And my dog starts freaking out, just barking like crazy. And I'm like, that's unusual. I wonder what that is. So I kind of lean over to get a closer look, right?
Mm-hmm. And so, what are we talking about? Like a otter that's in love with a deer?
No, it was a cougar.
Sweet Mary, mother of...
Full on. And, I sort of paused and grabbed my dog's collar really fast because between my 30-pound dog and a cougar, I knew who was going to win. And the cougar just loped through my yard. I mean, it was, and it wasn't even in the woods, and it was just like, it was right at the edge of my yard. I could see it perfectly clearly, and it was chasing after the deer, and it just kept going. And I was like, so that was a cougar. And of course, in Gabriola, there's no predators. There's deer and there's people's loose dogs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, was that really a cougar? So I go down the yard, and I after it's gone, I go down and I look at the footprint, and I'm like, yeah, that's definitely a cougar print.
Oh, wow.
And then I tell people are like, no, there's no cougars in Gabriola. And I'm like, no, it was really a cougar. And they're like, you sure it wasn't, a dog? I'm like, it wasn't a dog, it was a cougar. And people are like, no, not a cougar. A few days later, a friend of mine down the beach, and she hears this, wow. And she's like, is that a cougar? And there were sort of intermittent spottings throughout that week, and I guess wherever the cougar came from, it eventually left. Wow. Well, I don't know why it would leave, though, because Gabriel would be like a buffet for them, but
yeah, you'd think.
Got it still and went home.
Wow. Holy smokes. All right. Well, that's a great story. Thanks a lot, Ben.
No problem.
Cougars are so elusive and stealthy, most people who spend years backpacking, camping, or hunting never see or encounter them. I know, as a camper and a backpacker in the wilds of this great province, our family has never really encountered any wildlife beyond a distant sighting of a couple of black bears. I had to dig really deep for this next interview. Crossing the floor of my studio in the clothes closet and going to the den of my house, I managed to catch up with Kathy Gurr.
It was in the summer, I don't know, about 15 years ago, maybe. Okay. And we were taking our small dog, our Jack Russell, for a walk in the Elder Cedars Reserve. And I had the two daughters with me, and they were young at the time, maybe 8 and 10 years old at the time, probably. Mara, the youngest, being 8, and Manya being 10. And my youngest Mara didn't want to go for a walk in Elder Cedars, and so she was fussing and complaining, didn't want to go for a walk. And I just said, you have to come. I can't leave you in the car. That's just bad parenting. So, so Anya and I walked further ahead with the dog, and she was lagging behind, and she picked up a stick.
Can I just ask before we get to... This may be important to the story. What is the dog's name?
Henry.
And about the size of... like
Small
a little,
Jack Russell.
So it could be the size of a pig or a piglet. Right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, continue on. So a stick, right?
Yeah.
You were picking up a stick.
So Mara was lagging behind by about 10 or 20 feet and complaining, kind of whining, I don't want to walk. And she was kind of banging the bushes along the side of the trail with her stick. And we kept walking, and then all of a sudden, she came running up to me, almost ran into me, and said, Mama, something's hunting me. Something's hunting me, and it's big, and it's not a dog. And I just kind of, didn't really think much of it, and I she seemed really worried, and I said, are you sure it wasn't just a dog? And she goes, no, I saw it. It was big, and it wasn't a dog. And we walked a little bit further, and she stayed really close to me then. And suddenly the dog froze, and his haunches went up. And I could feel all the hair on my arms and on the back of my neck and on the back just stand on end too. I had this feeling. Mm-hmm. And then we heard this sound up in the trees. Mm-hmm. And it sounded like a deep, resonant sound of a cat sound.
Okay, so something like this. Let me just, I have a sample here.
That's it. That's the sound. Okay. Yes. And so right away we all sort of froze, and the girl said, Mom, what's that noise? And I didn't want them to panic because I was quite sure it was a cat of some huge size. So I just said to them, maybe it's just a raccoon or something, or the trees creaking, because it appeared to be coming from above us, further up and above us. And so
it was pretty dense for forest cover and sorrel and trees.
And those big trees
the
with
real
the big
dense
branches.
Part of Elder Cedars.
Yeah, and we were in the deep shade of it. We all sort of froze, and then I just made a decision. I did not want to look up where I heard the sound coming from. I didn't, because my instinct was telling me there's something there, and I didn't want to see it. I just somehow couldn't get myself to look. So I just said to the girls who were behind me, I said, turn around, we're going to just start walking back to the car. And they're like, okay. And they could just tell from the tone of my voice that there was no arguing. We're just going to do that. And I made sure the dog was behind us, because I guess I was thinking, if something's going to attack us, they can have the dog. And so then we walked. And then we walked and walked, and then as we got further away, I said, okay, let's just run. And so we ran the rest of the way to the car, and when we got in the car, the girls were like, wow, that wasn't a raccoon or a tree, was it? And we all sort of said at the same time, it was a cougar. And I just never forgot that. It was really, it was unforgettable experience, and to this day, Tamara is afraid of cougars. We couldn't get her to go even in our backyard for the longest time alone. After that happened, she was afraid that the cougar would get her in the backyard.
It probably didn't help that we nicknamed her Cougar Bait for a little while.
Oh, that was not good.
Yeah, there's a cougar screaming. Anyone ever hear that on the island and mistake it for maybe a hawk or a child? Now, for the official record, our dog Henry lived a full and long life and was never a sausage roll for a cougar, and the family got the counseling it needed. Now on to bears. Here's Allana to set the stage, and Mitch with his black bear report.
And as far as the bears, I've also heard that bears can often catch a ride on the log booms. Mm-hmm. And then they would hop on and hop off. And bears, you've seen bears swim, right? Like you've seen, so they're really good swimmers. So, yeah.
About 7 years ago. So I think we're looking at 2012, 2013.
Right.
At the Banford residence on South Road. And I was home and I heard cars honking and hooting and hollering down on the street, and walked down, and Chunky followed suit, and he had his nose up in the air, and all the other dogs swarmed in, and they started barking and going over to the far side of the fence towards Brickyard. So I go down there, and this lady, there was a lady that was parked down on the road, and she's like, "There's a bear." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "But there's no bears on Gabriola." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Did you see a bear?" She's like, "Yes." I was like, "Well, I think there's a bear on Gabriola." And she was like, "Do we call the police? Do we, start swimming now? What do we do here?" And so I walked down the driveway and up the property line on the other side of the fence from the dogs, locked in the yard. Up around the neighbors' sort of perimeter of their garden, I saw this black bear. And she was just kind of moving along and not too...
seemed to be a female. Right?
For
probably
a smaller bear. So I just assumed it was a female bear.
You're an acclimatized bear man, because you didn't seem to hesitate to walk into the woods.
Well, I became pretty comfortable around bears in the tree planting world.
Right.
You'd see them every other day. And they want about just as much to do with you as you want to do with them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there was like a 3-car pile up there at the end of the driveway, and this lady was stopping people, and there's a bear, and I said I would just let them go through, and I don't think that the bear was seen too much longer around. I think the bear actually was around for a week or two or something like that, and then
no more sightings after that.
No more sightings.
Was it in the vegetable garden? Did it get into the vegetables at all? Or
it was the neighbors were up and out, and it was working on its game of getting in their garden back and forth and stuff over there. And I think he came out and banging something around, and then the bear moved up. There's a big cliff behind those houses, and the bear kind of moved up in there.
So we can confirm, because you've had a sighting. This woman, I mean, that's secondhand, but here you are, and you did indeed see
a black bear on Gabriola Island.
There you go.
In primitive times, man regarded the black bear with reverence. Adult males weigh about 170 kilograms and are a little more than a meter in height at the shoulder. Appearing awkward and slow-moving, they can reach speeds of 55 kilometers an hour and are expert swimmers and climbers. The bear prefers heavily wooded areas and will eat almost anything that is available.
Nelson Thorne, Allana's husband, is a long-time islander by way of Newfoundland. And as with just about every Newfoundlander, you can always count on a good story from Nelson.
I don't really have a story, Ken, let me say.
Well, you do have a bit of a black bear story, though. When did that happen? How long ago?
That's not my story.
Okay.
I saw the bear, yeah. But it's not my story.
Okay, well then go on as it being not your story.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you see the bear?
By pure chance, I was, I think it was early in the morning or maybe a little after 8, sometime, I'm not quite sure of the time. I just saw it very briefly in Rudisher's yard at the end of Twin Beaches. And that was a surprise to me because I had been denying that there was a bear on the island. So I had to eat a little crow on that one.
Uh-huh.
I swore to Allana that no, people are imagining it's a big black dog. Mm-hmm. Or I may have even created it in my own mind.
Oh, the power of suggestion in there, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what I really envy people who have a good grasp on reality. Because I don't know necessarily if what we see is there or if it's been suggested to be there.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say on my bear story.
But when you saw it, it was like just a little glimpse in the yard. And you knew it wasn't a bobtailed lab or anything.
I've seen lots of bears because I lived in Whistler.
Yeah.
So they were a part of our life.
Yeah.
They'd be on the Valley Trail. They'd be everywhere. But I saw it enough to know that it was certainly a bear. I don't know the age or the gender.
Gender, yeah. You just couldn't get that good of a look at the undercarriage.
That's right. That's right. But it was solitary.
Yeah.
And on a grassy field, moving towards the ocean on the lawn. That's all I can say about the bear.
Because again, like you said, you didn't think you weren't believing the stories, and
That's
there
right.
you are.
I wasn't believing the stories, but I've had to eat crow a few times because I don't necessarily believe any story. And then, it's sort of like I said earlier, show me.
But that's what you've got to be. You're almost like a scientist in that. You have to be a skeptic on it, right?
That's right.
You have to test the hypothesis, the story.
I'm quite sure that it wasn't my imagination that there was a bear on the lawn.
So should we just keep wandering the forest trails and beaches of the island, blissfully at peace with the quietude of nature and all the little creatures and the restful sounds of the forest? Would you have for general advice and precaution for islanders who may be way too complacent about anything ever being on this island beyond a raccoon to worry about?
Remember to keep the proper respect for wildlife that it needs to have. Cougars and bears, they're wildlife. They should be fearful of humans. They don't need to have positive interactions with humans where they get used to people coming closer to get a photo, to try and have more of an experience with them. Keep them wild. The nicest thing you can do to them is to be mean. Reinforce that being around humans is not what they want.
Right.
Yell at them. Make them uncomfortable. They'll leave.
Right, yeah.
And that's the best thing you can do for them.
Whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved.
Thanks, David Attenborough. That's him reading from Charles Darwin on the BBC. And thanks to Allana, Mitch, Nelson, Ben, Melinda, Kathy, and Officer Dan. Now, if you've got a cougar, bear, or other rare critter story from Gabriola, why not go on our show's Facebook page or blog and share your story or photos? Thanks for listening. Bye for now.